I'm Sienna. I'm the kid.
I'm Sarah. I'm the mom.
This is Queer Kid Straight Mom.
Let's talk. Welcome back to Queer Kids Straight Mom. On today's episode, we are addressing a question that one of our listeners brought to us, which was, how do I approach asking my parents to use my chosen name? This listener is really nervous about doing this. And so we are going to kind of approach it from both a parent perspective, and Sienna is going to provide some feedback from other people who have gone through this. So the number one piece of advice that I found for when your child comes to you with this: here's who I am, here's maybe pronouns, here's the name I have chosen. And this is the hardest piece of advice, especially for really involved parents. This has nothing to do with you, because you come across so many reactions of, but this is the name I gave you. This is the name I chose for you. This was meaningful. We spent so long trying to figure out what we should name you, and this is what we chose. And I know that we had a little bit of that. I struggled a little bit, and you have chosen to stick with your name, Sienna.
Mainly out of laziness. It's a lot of work to change your name.
But it doesn't bother you. Like, it doesn't bring up bad feelings.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was just having this conversation with a classmate who is trans and started using a different name over the course of our writing class together. And so, yeah, in general, like, it doesn't bother me. However, we both found when we were trying to write about ourselves in the third person that we were like, I don't like using the name that everybody's been using for me. That makes me uncomfy. And so she ended up using a different name a few weeks into the class. And I didn't. I stuck with Sienna, but I did use the name that I briefly went by in high school when I was writing about myself in the third person, because it just was easier. But no, in general, I'm kind of like, whatever. I don't have strong feelings associated with it.
Yeah, I'm probably jumping around a little bit here, but one of the things I read that makes it really important for kids that feel strongly about it is that hearing that name that they were given as part of sort of a definition of them that feels wrong to them, especially if it's like a really feminine name, or, that it brings up a lot of bad emotions surrounding being classified as something they are not.
Right.
Which I guess we could have begun with that. But yeah, that is not something that you have felt really strongly about, to my understanding. But you did, at one point in high school say, I want people to call me this. And, I did that exact thing that this advice is advising against, which was to immediately go to what that meant to me, which was, but this is who I know you as. And that's so hard for me, which it's not about me. Parents, it's not about you. And that is, like I said, really, really hard to accept and digest, because the truth is, developmentally, even if you don't have a child who questions gender or sexuality or anything like that, it's just a developmental stage that kids go through of needing to define themselves as who they are learning they are, not who their family has told them they are. And so that just takes on another dimension when it comes to names, pronouns, things like that. You could have a kid that you've always dressed in pink and bought pink clothes for, and then they hit adolescence and they're like, I don't ever want to wear pink again. I want to dress all in black. And that, in a similar way, is hard. So my point is that it's developmentally normal for teenagers, and it's developmentally normal for parents to have this back and forth. And I mean that to be helpful, that if you're feeling like my kid has come to me with these gender questions and these name questions that feel alien to me and scary, like, every parent is going through that with something. If their kids are being open with them.
Something I came across on Instagram that I thought phrased it really well was someone discussing when they came out to their parents and asked them to use a different name for them. some conversation came up of like, oh, are you upset about me not? Like, I feel bad because, you chose this name for me and you through a lot of effort and it's important to you. And their parents responding like, you know, a name is a gift and we chose it for you, but you're not obligated to keep a gift. Ultimately, if keeping a gift makes you feel worse than not keeping it, then that's the gift is not doing its job, right? And so we want you to stick with it if it feels good and, choose a different one if it's not fitting you anymore.
That makes sense. It's a good way to look at it, and a very wise response from parents who obviously had worked through some things either in preparation or very, very rapidly on this because, and this was a case where the kid asked the question, does it bother you? But one of the other big pieces of advice that I came across was talk to your friends, talk to somebody else about how you feel about it, but don't talk to your kids about it being difficult for you. Because again,
Genuinely.
not about you.
Yeah, it's and I think that was something that I did struggle with was even if the name itself wasn't a big deal to me, feeling like I had to manage your feeling bad and you're feeling upset about the name, I think did end up causing me a lot of like guilt and stress and anxiety. When you start feeling like not only are you trying to figure out what's right for you, but also, you are responsible for your parents' emotional response. It's not fun.
This isn't like meant to be a defense. This is more just letting other parents know that you're not alone feeling this way. It's really hard to know the right thing to say and the right way to react on the spot, which is why we're putting this information out there
Mhm.
to help other people. Yeah. So, the just kind of the gist of it is you want to show your kids that you are respecting the way they want to be seen by the world. That as they're growing up, they're saying, I want to define myself, and this is how I would like the world to see me and address me. And it's sort of just a symbol of acceptance and love to say, okay. And, I have known parents whose kids have kind of gone through that and then been like, never mind, which also that's fine too. Don't assume that it's a phase because that word phase sort of implies a frivolity to the whole thing. But
Mhm.
for some kids, it is just, I want to try this on. And no, that wasn't right. But respecting the process and giving them room to do that, I think is the bottom line, which all of this stuff really comes down to showing love and support and acceptance to your kids. Like, as long as you're driven by that, it may be a little more circuitous of a route than your kids might like, because some of us are working through things too. But if you're driven by the love and accept and respect your kids, you'll probably end up in the right place.
All of our episodes either boil down to like be chill and kind and respectful or media should be more gay.
Yeah, a little bit. So, what are some of the experiences that you have heard of?
So, I think one thing I noticed in some of the responses I got and like some of the people that I've talked to over the years, one thing I've noticed as an approach that some people have taken was using the name conversation as an opportunity to try to kind of invite parents and family members and friends in. So, one person told me that she like basically asked her family, "Hey, I'm a girl. What would you name me if I were a girl?" And, tried to like work with them to figure out like what name would suit her best and what name other people liked. And I think that maybe helps provide like maybe a more of a feeling of involvement and like, oh, my kid isn't just trying to reject this gift I gave them, right? My kid is trying to work with me, which, yeah, I think that's a good strat. I also met someone once who went by she's Jewish and goes by a Hebrew name, which actually sounds to, Western ears sounds more masculine, but it's, traditionally a female Hebrew name. And she told me that she initially wanted to go by Emma and went to her mom, and her mom was like, you can't have that white ass name. And so ended up settling on this Hebrew name. So yeah, I think something I've noticed among some of the trans people I know who have more successful relationships or supportive relationships with their family has been that approach of, it's a two-way street and you're not obligated to keep your parents involved when you're choosing a name. Like loads of people know that people like, teenagers choose nicknames all the time. Teenagers choose nicknames all the time without involving their parents, and it's fine. But if you're really worried about how your parents might feel about it, that could be one approach.
Yeah, I like that. That seems like a thoughtful way of getting across that this is not a rejection of you or anything that you have provided me. It's just who I am.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably one of the main, most interesting approaches I have seen from the people I know. To be honest, I also know that a lot of people do just kind of take the approach of like, oh, it's a school nickname, ha ha ha, and then like see how their parents react to it, especially if, it's either like a modification of your given name or if it's kind of a gender neutral name, like non-binary people love their random nature names. So, if like the name that I went by in high school was Jay, and it's like, whatever. It's just like a nickname at high school. It's all good. And then yeah, see how your family reacts to that and get a vibe. And so for some people, the vibe is negative and they end up drawing a line between the two. And like people, their family keeps using a different name, which sucks. But for some people, that is what feels safer. And, for some people, their parents are like, oh, that name actually does suit you. Like, that's kind of what dad said after a while was like, I kind of like Jay. You kind of are more of a Jay.
Have you heard of any approaches that just did not go well, did not work, either from maybe I shouldn't have done it that way or wow, I don't see anything wrong with what I did, but my parents did not take that well?
It's a tricky question. I sort of feel like in general, when parents don't take it well, there's not necessarily a particular approach that goes along with it. Sometimes parents just don't handle things well. So yeah, I'm trying to think, but
Or if they didn't handle it well, how did people respond? Or was that just the sort of, okay, I'm going to draw a line and be this person at school and this person at home?
yeah, that I think is the most common thing I've seen. I do think that sometimes, and this sounds very like wishy-washy and going back and forth, but it's so subjective and tricky, because people respond differently to different things. But I also have seen parents who feel kind of betrayed by a kid like asking to go by a different name at school and not looping them in at all, which I think is a little bit of that thing you were talking about, right? Just not having worked through like, this is developmentally appropriate and my kid is going to do this. And like, as far as things for kids to do behind my back, going by a different name really isn't that bad of one. But, I think I have seen parents not react very well to that approach as well.
Like hearing that they've been going by a different name behind their back.
Hmm. Yeah, like, seeing someone from school referred to them by a different name, for example. Or and it's because sometimes it's really hard to draw that boundary, right? It's not necessarily as easy as you think it's going to be because then all of a sudden, your debate coach starts calling you by that name because your friend's mom is the speech coach, and it can kind of then start snowballing a little bit, which can be very nice if everybody's all on board with everything. But if you're trying to keep it a secret, that can be really tricky.
Yeah. How about extended family? How important do you think it is for parents to fight that battle? Like, that's fine. You can go by that. I'm not making your grandpa call you that because that's going to turn into such a thing.
I mean, it depends on the kid, right? If someone feels like, oh yeah, this is more of like a nickname, but I'm not that emotionally invested in it, like me, right? Then, whatever. But if a kid has indicated that something is really important to them, that this is, sort of a significant identity marker for them, then, which I think is the case for more trans people probably, then yeah, like as a parent, I think it's partly your responsibility to kind of fight those fights for your kid because sometimes extended family can be some of the most challenging people to deal with, especially if a kid ends up feeling like I have to do this all on my own and I'm the only one standing up for myself. Then it starts feeling really isolating. Like, you're the only one in your family who supports who you are, that you don't have anyone on your side. And so, yeah, I think if a kid has indicated to you that their chosen name is important to them, then yeah, you should be the one who is like, actually, they go by this now.
What's interesting about that is sometimes, and that's not to say yes or no. Like I'm not arguing with that at all. Just it's interesting to think about the fact that parents are sometimes going through a lot of those same emotions, probably with their own parents, right? Like
Mhm.
there are parents who, if they go to their very conservative, traditional parent and say, your grandchild would like to be called this now, that grandparent in a lot of these situations is going to turn that into a referendum on the parent and their parenting. And so the kid gets up the nerve to take this to the parent. And even if the parent handles it beautifully, yes, that's fine. I understand. Then they in turn have to go through now I have to take this to my parent, who might be cool or might turn around and be like, you're so permissive. No, put your foot. And then it turns into you're not a good parent. So there's an interesting trickle effect there sometimes that is another step that not saying is not necessary, just in the parent defense column, just an urge for patience sometimes when parents are navigating some of these things too. That no, that's not the kid's problem. That's the parent's issue to work out. But if it seems like things are moving at a snail's pace, or sometimes it's because your parent is also somebody's kid. Like in a couple of people I know's case, they're opening themselves up to some criticism and some unkindness from a parent if they bring that up.
Mhm.
Not the kid's problem, but something that I think it's just helpful to consider as any member of a family dealing with any other member of a family, what the other members' experiences are as you navigate through things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting developmental thing here where I don't think a lot of kids necessarily view their family members as full human beings, which sounds really bad. And it's not like I think you are a doll born to do my bidding, but I think it's, a lot of times kids don't understand oh, you have your own relationship dynamics going on. Mom and dad maybe have different relationships to, my mom's parents and my dad's parents and my mom's siblings and my dad's siblings. And, mom and dad aren't a unit necessarily. And I think that's, again, a developmental thing and that'll come and it's fine. But it is something that's important to keep in mind. That being said, I also think that two things to keep in mind. First of all, you as an adult have a level of distance, you have the ability to control your distance from your family in a way that your kid absolutely does not. You have, a level of emotional maturity and development that your kid does not. You have independent social circles that your kid does not necessarily have the same level of opportunity to develop. And so you are much better equipped to deal with those things, which again is not you're not valid for feeling, a little bit oh, now all of a sudden I'm the child and I've freaked out and scared and don't know what to do. That's absolutely a valid feeling, just, keeping it in perspective. And the other thing is I say this a lot, I feel but I think this is a situation in which you as a parent have to be able to develop the ability to sort of distance yourself and set your feelings aside and be what do I need to do to support my kid? And then, I will work through my own challenges with my parents and my relatives.
And I am just speculating here. I'm lucky enough to have parents that I feel are really supportive of who you are, and they forget the pronouns a good portion of the time, but it's not because they're no, I will not do that. It's just practice, right? But I know that there are people that just have those, didn't grow up in those kinds of households and don't have those supportive relationships with their parents. And that becomes a much more difficult thing. But I mean, you're right. Parents have that ability to draw boundaries too. And that's an important part of standing up for your kids. There's not a lot of black and white, I guess, except for the love and accept and support part, right? The rest of it is everyone just kind of trying to figure out the best way to play the hand they've been dealt. What would you tell our listener?
So I think the main sort of bottom line for me would be think about your parents, think about how they've, if you've already come out as trans to them, think about how they reacted to that. Did they react like emotionally? Did they express like a sense of betrayal of like, oh, but you were my baby boy or girl? Because I think there's a lot of overlap in the reaction to that element and then the name element. If you haven't, come out as trans first, then my approach there would be, maybe bring up transgender people, like famous trans people, trans representation in the media, something like that, to get a gauge of like what the vibe is if they're reacting positively, as kind of a first step, as a first kind of measure. And then use that to sort of come up with a plan of action for a name. Because again, your parents as individuals and the way that they react to those questions and those requests is going to inform what the best course of action is going to be in your particular case. You can definitely go with some of the strategies that we talked about in this episode if there's something else you think is going to work better. But I would say that's the bottom line to me. And unfortunately, it's not super helpful because every case is so unique. But yeah, just trying to approach your parents in the way that is most effective to approach them.
Yeah, there are a lot of resources out there too. Trevor Project, definitely know that you can reach out to them if the conversation doesn't go well and you're in distress, or if you feel like you can't bring this up with your parents and you're feeling really like trapped and upset by that. It's a great resource with people trained to kind of work you through some of those things. Yeah, ultimately, a name, even a gender, doesn't change who your kids are. And that's something important to remember too. It feels like, oh, that's going to change everything. But your kid is still your kid. And you don't really look at them any differently. They're just your kid.
What's the Shakespeare line about a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet? Like, yeah, your kid might behave differently, might be trying to explore parts of their identity, but each step that they take forward is a step towards determining who they are as a person. And that might be a very, very circuitous route, but it's always important to support that journey.
And I always just like to provide this reminder that even if it feels like a rejection initially, the fact that your kid feels like they can talk to you about this and wants to include you in this part of their life is the opposite of a rejection. It is, I feel safe with you, and so I feel like I can bring this to you. And so you should feel good about that, not insulted.
There's a very good chance that your kid has already set up like an elaborate gamut of tests to determine whether or not they can talk to you about this in the first place. So if they're talking to you about it, you passed the tests.
And you're probably going to keep all of those things secret, huh? You're not going to give parents a cheat sheet, are you?
No.
I think it's incredible that we used the word circuitous twice in this conversation.
I actually thought of that when I was about to use it. And then I was like, I should come up with a different word. I should use a better word. And then I couldn't come up with anything.
I mean, sometimes the right word is just the right word. All right. Well, hopefully this has been helpful. As always, we would love to hear questions or comments. Share your experiences with us and let us know what has worked well or not worked in your household. What are we talking about next time, Sienna?
We are talking about fan culture 101. Many gay people, many queer people are very heavily involved in fan culture. And there is a lot of slang and a lot of references that are very heavily used. And, if you're involved, you're like, there's not even a different way of explaining this, that's just my headcanon, And so we're going to be going over some of the terms that you might come across that your kid might be using, and also explain, go into why it is that queer people are so drawn to these subcultures.
This will be fun because usually I feel like I'm coming on here and like, here's some information, give me feedback. But this time it's going to be the opposite. You're going to come to me with information and I get to react.
Do you know what a ship is?
It's when you want like to see two people be together, right? You ship them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Go on. But don't give me a quiz. That's too much. Let's not do it in a quiz format. All right. Jeopardy. No,
Uh-huh.
thank you. All right. Well, tell Sienna between now and the next episode if you want to make sure anything's included to throw at me on that one, but not to quiz me on. And have a great couple of weeks, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, interesting, or just mildly amusing, please consider rating and reviewing us on your podcasting platform of choice. It really helps us to get the word out there and spread this information as far as we can.
And as always, check out our website at queerkidsstraightmom.com or visit us on Facebook, Queer Kid Straight Mom, Instagram at queerkid.straightmom, or Twitter at queerkidstr8mom.
And if you're feeling especially generous, please consider joining our Patreon by searching Queer Kids Straight Mom. It helps us fund this podcast.